All across America, there's something in the air. At a time of year when many try to escape it, there are some who seek out the freezing cold and embrace it. Because in order to play one of the world's hottest sports, you need to start with a cold sheet of ice. And that's just the beginning. The better you get at this game, the more it rocks. Curling is a sport of skill and strategy, where success depends on a smooth delivery and an iron will. And victory can be decided in the smallest of margins. That's what happened in the third draw of this elite round-robin tournament as the American men fell by 1 point to Team Japan. Tonight, they look to bounce back against one of the world's rising curling powers in China. Which country will take the next step towards the top prize in this top round-robin tournament? We'll find out. There's something in the air, but it's not the cold. Friday night, it's curling night on NBCSN. Welcome to another edition of NBCSN Curling Night, presented by the United States Olympic Committee. One more time back in the Twin Cities region of Minnesota. This proud state certainly thinks of itself as the curling epicenter of America. Don't know if that's official, but certainly it fills the bill for this event. And Curling Night, again, featured in this great part of our nation. Back at the United States Curling National Training Center, Fogarty Arena in Blaine, Minnesota, home of the Four Seasons Curling Club, just outside of downtown. It's draw for the men's portion of this men's and women's tournament for the United States, China, Japan, and New Zealand. Jason Knapp here with 2010 Olympian John Benton. And before we look ahead to the United States matchup with China tonight, John, let's look back at what happened in draw 3 for the American men against Japan.
Well, it looked like a much closer game, much better execution from the U.S. men than we've seen so far, but they came up just a little bit short against a scrappy Japan team. Japan coming out a winner 6-5 here. Some measurements, some really close play in this game. So I really think that the U.S. is going to have to step it up even another notch to beat the Team China tonight.
So right now, Japan, China tied for first with records of 2-1. New Zealand and the U.S. trailing behind with 1-2 marks entering draw number 4. And again, it's the U.S. and the Chinese going head-to-head tonight. This Chinese team has some of the pieces of the group that just missed a medal last year in Sochi.
Yeah, they really outperformed expectations in Sochi. They lost their skip, Rui Lue, but they retained 3 of the 5 members, and they've played very well on tour this year so far, so I expect to see good things from them tonight.
Well, the Americans certainly will have to be on their game. What are the U.S. thoughts about the game? Let's check in with Tracy Wilson.
Team USA comes into tonight's match against China with a 1-2 record. I spoke with U.S. skip Heath McCormick about the losses and the changes they plan to make going forward. He said the problem has not been with our strategy, it's been with execution. So the game plan remains the same, and that's to be aggressive with the hammer. But he said we have to tighten up our execution. The losses have been close. They're not far off. He says we just have to make those key shots.
Tracy, thanks. As we get set to meet the teams, China and the United States.
Heath McCormick, skip.
Chris Plies, third.
Colin Huffman, second.
Ryan Brunt, lead.
臧嘉亮 skip.
邹德嘉 vice skip.
巴德勋 second. 周强 lead.
The United States will be throwing red rocks, China with the yellow rocks. China throwing first here to begin, which means the United States has the hammer, the last shot to start off the first of the 8 ends. Zhou Chang, the 23-year-old lead for China, starts off the game.
Well, I'm expecting to see a lot of rocks in play this particular match. Both teams good at playing the very aggressive style of curling.
Mentioned the Chinese men, 4th in Sochi after finishing 8th at the 2010 Olympics. Their growth in the game is certainly coming at a rapid pace. Here's Ryan Brunt, the lead for the U.S.
Right out of the gate, the U.S. is playing a tick shot here. They're actually trying to move the Chinese stone over without removing it from play. That's that free guard zone we just got done talking about. You can move that rock without moving it out of play, and that's a great shot to start the game by Ryan.
Well, the last time we saw the United States men here on curling night against New Zealand, very slow pace to that game with the teams trading just single points. Do you expect this to be more active early?
Well, from all reports, the U.S. men are really executing at a higher level than they were that game that we saw them. So that shot there was a great example of that. That's a very high degree of difficulty shot, and I'm really looking forward to them executing more shots this game and making a great match of it.
Heath McCormick, the skip for the United States, looking on. He lives in Canada, but a dual citizen, and curls for the Stars and Stripes. Here's the second stone, first end for the 28-year-old Brunt from Portage, Wisconsin.
Called the exact same shot here, trying to make another tick.
Just in, maybe short. Yeah, get it in. Yep, get it out of the way, anyways.
This one a little lighter. Over curling that rock by a lot. Not the worst result. He gets another corner guard out of it. The idea with those tick shots is to really free up that center line, make sure that there's no garbage out front for China to get behind.
China and the U.S. More to come on NBCSN Curling Night after this. NBCSN Curling Night is being brought to you by the United States Olympic Committee. For the latest deals on official Team USA gear, visit TeamUSAShop.com. And by the 2016 World Financial Group Continental Cup of Curling. Come see why Las Vegas rocks. It's a fine night in Minnesota. A look at the mighty Mississippi rolling through the Minnesota region in the Twin Cities. And for more on what we'll see tonight, how about a little explanation, John Benton?
Well, we're going to get a look at the important markings on the curling sheet here. Of course, you have the scoring area, which is the rings. Closest to the center at the end of the end scores. You also have the hog line. You have to be across the hog line to be in play. And then the very important free guard zone, where the first four rocks can't be removed from play until the fifth stone if they end up in that area.
Badu Shin played second on that China fourth place team in Sochi. Also second at last year's World Championships, which were held in Beijing in China. And the Chinese team sixth at the Worlds in each of the last 3 years.
You know, I've had a chance to watch this team a lot, both on tour and at the Olympics, and they've really grown a lot. And it was a real treat to watch them play in Sochi, just because they executed at a degree that no other team did other than Canada.
Yeah, they certainly were one of the best teams in the round robin portion of the competition. They actually tied for second with the second best record in round robin, 7-2 in Canada. It was only behind Sweden, and then Sweden beat the Chinese in the bronze medal match 6-4.
Whoa. Yep. Whoa.
And there's another great shot by the U.S. team. Colin Huffman throwing a run-back double there. See this rock coming in. Plenty of weight. Gets both yellow rocks moving out of the house. Great shot by Colin.
Now the 30-year-old from Seattle, Washington, grew up in Alaska. Able to check in with an important shot with his first stone.
China going to put up another center guard here, try and establish something up front that they can get around. But the U.S. looking pretty good right now. At some point, Heath McCormick will probably take a chance at getting under the red stones on the right or the left side of the rings. but for now content to just peel that center rock off.
Huffman surveying another of his offerings.
Hitting. I think curl. Curl a bit, yeah. Okay.
So that was actually a miss there by Colin. He wanted to peel that stone and have his shooter roll away. He's left a guard up there now for Team China. It's not on the center line, so it's not the worst spot for a stone, but certainly would like that further away from the center line.
Right now, the Chinese team with a chance maybe to use one of those red stones against the United States. Zhou Dujia.
下肩带。我。左强带啊。哦。往后插。哦。让他甩了。下肩带。
One thing about the Chinese team, as we see their rock come in here, it looks like it's going to slide a little deep. The Chinese team, as well as a lot of the international teams, are spending a vast amount of time in North America, in Canada, and the U.S. They're traveling much more than they used to gain that valuable experience needed to play at a world level.
Here's Chris Plies,
Weight's good. Touch up.
2010 Olympian from Duluth.
Whoa. Hard. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Trying to get by this guard, get a little tap, hopefully roll his shooter a little bit. Great shot. So already we're seeing better execution out of Team USA than we've seen previously.
Again, the U.S. dropping 2 of its first 3 matches in this double round robin competition, but this helping the cause at the outset for the United States.
That rock finishes up and we get a nice little roll underneath. Great look at the rock sitting behind that corner guard.
Second rock for Zhou Dujia.
This rock coming in a little hot. Looks like he'll get a piece of it, but he'll roll into the open.
Okay.
So China lying 1
Like staying weight.
near the button.
Okay.
Heath McCormick
Okay.
laying out the broom where he would like this shot to go. Again, John, tighter time frame for these teams to work with.
Only 8 ends, which means that you want to get aggressive, you want to get ahead in the game and maintain that lead earlier.
Again, 59 minutes is the time limit. Less than the normal 73 in a 10-end affair.
Chris Plies with an open hit there.
That might have been more than normal. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. No, jeez. That's not control? What? Is that normal? That's, yeah.
So now the Chinese will plot their strategy. Where's the Chinese men so close to a breakthrough at the last Olympics? The Chinese women winning bronze in the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. The first Asian country to win an Olympic curling medal. So certainly the growth of the sport coming along. And again, the World Championships held in Beijing last March. And Beijing would certainly like to continue its quest to host another Olympics overall. They're in the running for the 2022 Winter Olympics.
So you heard Heath McCormick and Chris Plies on his shot. Chris just overthrew that. He threw that harder than they were expecting, so they didn't get the roll. So now Team China trying to get the roll that Chris did not get.
Zhang Jialiang looking at his efforts.
Made the roll, but Chris Plies able to sweep that rock out of the rings. Advantage Team USA if they can get a rock around here. Sweeping this rock late. It made a big move on him. Catches about half of it, but you see this rock roll all the way out of the rings.
So here's Heath McCormick. Again, don't let that graphic fool you. Lives in Ontario, but again, representing the United States. His first stone
You got plenty of room. It's all there. You got line for, yeah. You're good.
Involved in insurance and real estate in Canada.
Yeah. Through? Where is it?
This does not sound good. Sweeper saying they think that this one is through.
Sit down, baby.
And this is a little bit of what we saw out of Heath in our first television match, is he just struggled with those open shots.
That one did not sit down, baby. It went all the way through. So now the U.S. may be squandering an opportunity. Let's see what China has on its final stone.
Hard, 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 come on, hard, hard. Whoa, whoa.
China able to get that rock around the guard and into the rings. I believe it's going to be fully covered.
Okay. What do you got, Colin? Thin half?
So the decision here for Heath McCormick in the U.S., John.
Well, you heard them say it's a thin half, which means if he wanted to try and hit that yellow one, roll both rocks out to blank the end and keep the hammer, it would be tough. So to peel out the end, he'd have to hit this yellow rock and get by this red guard very narrowly. Be really, really tough.
So as opposed to being in true scoring mode, it's now salvage mode time for Heath McCormick in the United States, trying to get at least one and get on the board, but give up the hammer.
Weight should be close. You got plenty of room. Play the weight.
This is an important shot for Heath after throwing his first one through. And this one looks light.
We're way short. It's a mile short. Okay.
And the front end giving up on it because they knew that it wasn't going to be close. So the U.S. not even forced to one. China able to steal one without the hammer in the opening end. Not the start that the United States desired, but plenty more curling to come. Curling night underway from Minnesota. NBCSN Curling Night presented by the United States Olympic Committee. It continues from Minnesota in the lovely Twin Cities area, in Blaine, Minnesota to be exact. China stealing one in the first from the United States. So the Americans have the hammer again. Can they score this time with the hammer as action is underway in the second end?
U.S. getting themselves into position here with the hammer. You see that red stone of the United States near the forefoot. China being forced to throw a freeze here. Try and freeze up to the face of that stone. Really reduce the scoring area is what this shot is about. And that's a bit of a miss from Team China. They did not want to bounce off that rock and leave it in the open.
Roll right on it, huh?
So the United States with shot rock as Chris Plies gets ready to put forth his second rock of this end.
Like this at all?
An Olympian in 2010 in Vancouver. Plies certainly would have his sights on getting back there. Of course, for him, the memories of his father, Patrick, all painted up, rooting him on in Vancouver in 2010. Of course, Patrick passing away due to brain cancer. And Chris certainly continuing to compete and value his curling career in his memory.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat story. I got to, of course, meet and know Patrick, and you know, just a great human being, and a pretty cool relationship between he and his son.
See the tattoos on his arm, certainly some of those in memory of his father.
Solid normal. Whoa!
U.S. trying to make a hit and roll here.
Whoa!
Sweepers are staying away from this, which usually means that it's hanging out.
No.
Hangs out, and he pushes it right through the hole in the back there. That's, I don't know if you could do that twice if you tried. So now China can really go on the offense, they'll want to come into this position here in front of the U.S. stone, freeze to the face of that stone, similar to the last shot that they tried.
We'll see if they can accomplish that task. The 26-year-old skip, Zhang Jialang, was the lead on China's team at the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, where they finished 8th. And again, the lead again when they were 4th in Sochi a year ago. Different throwing first rocks than last rocks and having the pressure on you.
It certainly is. I've had a chance to play every position on the team over my career, and finished up skipping my own team for a few years. Started out skipping. It is a completely different dynamic when your team's counting on you to make that last one. And big shots like this.
China beat Japan at the Pacific Asia Championships in November. That was the first event for Zhang as a skip.
For shots like this, the critical piece of throwing a freeze is really giving it to your sweepers, which he's actually done there too well. He was a little bit light. But he'd rather be there than come down and click off of that red stone in the forefoot and leave an open hit for the U.S.
Always intriguing to hear the competitors from foreign lands intersperse English with their native tongues, and you heard that sorry come from Zhang as he came up a little bit short.
Actually, almost all of the international teams are using English for their sweep calls. Hurry hard, yes, no, whoa, right off. Not sure what the reason for that is, but I find that pretty interesting that it's almost all of the sweep calling is done in English.
I'm just going to throw the draw of the button. I'm going to throw the same as what I threw.
As what you threw for what?
I'm going to throw the same as what I just threw for that last free draw.
Okay.
You like that?
Yeah.
So some vocal confirmation from Heath McCormick's front end for what he's going to try to attempt.
So I think he just wants to get to the top forefoot here.
Where? Weight's close. Weight's pretty good.
Whoa.
Line's good. You got room.
Line's good.
Yep.
Not heavy.
Oh, line's good.
Yep. Hard.
Line's
So
good.
let's see if Heath can
right to it.
find
right to
his
it.
draw weight.
Line's good. Just play right to it. Come on.
Hard. Go. Go.
Bring this rock all the way in for second count.
And there it is, the U.S. lies 2.
We touched that guard and went over a little bit.
Fans on hand appreciating that effort.
Line's good. Gotta go.
Beautiful draw by Heath.
Right
Great
to it.
recovery
Right to it.
from his first two.
Line's good. Just play right to it.
See this rock coming right in. Good communication by the team, knowing exactly where they need to place that stone, and that's a great, great shot by Heath.
A well put together team effort, putting the United States in position to possibly score multiple points here with the hammer after China was able to steal one from the U.S. when the Americans had the hammer to begin the game.
It's a big challenge for Team China early to make a freeze here, try and get out of trouble.
有点顶啊，力量。线，还有切6切，切8缺，
放网线呢？
放网线。可以啊，2个量可以啊，正8。
This rock is way out there, hasn't curled yet. There it goes. There it goes. Gonna have to work it to get it in for shot. And he does. He just rolls in for second count.
So the U.S. still with the shot rock for the moment. But now, what's Heath McCormick have to work with coming up after we look at this end of the Chinese stone?
Just comes in, over curls a little bit. It hung out there for a long time, but then clicks off of second count. And I'm not sure how much of this Heath can see. Should be almost all of it. So there's a big chance for at least a score of 2, maybe 3 for the U.S. here.
Once we get by that guard, we'll just pound the hell out of it, huh? Yep.
So as you hear, it's all about getting by that guard.
McCormick ready. Chance to help the U.S. strike out to the lead with a multiple point effort if he can put this rock in the right spot.
Really working this rock. Got to get it by the guard. And he does not get it by the guard, and so it's just 1 point for the U.S.
So the U.S. does score, but the chance to have a big end, not happening. Still 1-1 after 2 on NBCSN Curling Night. You know, if you look at the moon the right way, it looks like one big house. Great place to put your rocks and score? Maybe in the future. Right now, let's focus on the action at hand and the houses on this surface of ice in Minnesota. Curling night continues. The United States and China underway. The U.S. tied up with the Chinese, each team getting a point in the first 2 ends. End number 3 already in progress.
No ad. Should be all there. Whoa.
Well, we're seeing pretty good execution out of both teams, especially Team USA. Just Heath McCormick has struggled a little bit to start out. This rock coming in, they really wanted to just draw under that pair of yellows. Got a little fortunate with a little bit of a rub of the yellow, keeping their rock in the rings, but it is wide open.
Again, that red rock of the U.S. is the scoring rock right now. And China with the hammer in this end. Badushin. His first stone here in the third.
China trying to make a hit and roll here. Well done. Right to the back forefoot. It is behind those 2 center guards of the U.S. But without the hammer, that's not going to bother Heath McCormick too much. Looks like we're going to play a freeze right around these 2 guards.
Maybe a foot less or 2 feet less.
Just want to bring this rock in and have it freeze right to the nose of the yellow stone, right on the button.
So Colin Huffman looking to curl this one into the proper position.
Good. Yep. Yeah, go. Yeah.
Sweeping this one early, which means it's curling. They're trying to keep it straight to get it by the guards. And it looks like it's going to wreck on their own guard.
Wow. I think curling over or what? No, it's just curling. It's way slower. Yeah.
But the U.S. still having issues here with this ice, John, even though we're in the third end.
Yeah, there hasn't been a ton of play on that side of the ice, and the ice is different based on the number of rocks that have been played on that particular track. So the players will take note of that and keep track of that throughout a game. It's just early yet, and that side seems to be curling and maybe a little bit slower, as you heard Colin say. So China now with a huge opportunity to go on offense here, get another rock into the rings in the top forefoot. And the U.S. would be in big trouble with just a few rocks to come.
Badushin looking on.
Wow, they just watched that one. They really wanted that rock to come into the forefoot there, and they just watched it.
For the United States at this competition, the new high-performance program in place, the best players put together, hopefully to earn the best results.
With the high performance program set up the way it is, they have a lot of access to resources that we didn't always have before. You know, we now have a sports psychologist. Brian McWilliams is around and always with us to help with their physical fitness and training off ice. Obviously, they have us as coaches who are with them at every event, as well as camps. One of the things that having a program like this allows us to do is ask the athletes, you know, is this something that you're willing to do and able to do? And then from those athletes that can, then we can sort of, you know, we get to handpick and put them together how we think they'll fit the best. End goal is medals, you know, world championship, Olympic medals. You know, that's definitely what we're after.
Certainly the start of a new process for the United States. How will this end? We'll show you in a moment.
I think you need bumper. I think you need a lot more than backline.
A bit of a congested third end here for the United States and China on curling night. Tied at 1. Chance for one of these teams maybe to open things up here in the third.
Well, we have tons of rocks in play.
Wait's close.
Chris Ply's trying to execute a double tap here. Really just trying to get a rock in shot stone position because there will be guards covering it pretty much no matter where he puts it. So very close, just over curled a bit.
That was hack though, wasn't it? It was hack.
Doesn't get shot out of that, but he gets second shot. The question will be, is there a way for them to still get at shot stone of China's? That view right there makes it look pretty bleak.
And this is the first time in the game China has had the hammer. They stole one from the U.S. in the first and forced the U.S. to take one in the second.
China trying to make a run back, and they actually hit their own out. That rock needed to curl up to hit on the nose to get the red one out of the forefoot. Looks like they're still shot based on the overhead, but just barely.
Yeah, the yellow one is the scoring stone right now.
Tap this one? Probably the easiest way. Or tap this one? That one's tough. It's probably easier to get in there than the draw, though.
So the difficulty that Heath has here is how to get second shots. So as we look at it,
I threw like hack.
the easiest way is going to be to hit this red stone where they're lining things up, almost on the nose back to this second red to try and push it into the rings for shot stone. Red to red into the forefoot.
Well, like back line, kind of.
The question, though, John, when you hear this discussion, if you're the skip Heath McCormick, do you want affirmation of what you thought, or do you want to kind of open the floor to your teammates?
Well, it really depends on the scenario, and this is a complicated enough situation where I think Heath was really looking for some better options.
Well, we'll see if they chose the right option here with a shot.
Wait's good. Yep. Whoa. Yep. Yep. Whoa. Yep. Yep. Hard. Really hard.
Need to hit this close to nose. Seems like it's over curling already. Little frustration. He had perfect weight there. If he had been able to connect with both stones, it would have been a great shot, but just struggling with line on that side of the ice.
He's curling a lot there. Oh, God. Man.
Frustration level mounting for the American contingent. Now we'll see the Chinese team go about their business of figuring things out. John, over the years, is there a country that you admire or a skip that you admire the way they go about their business of making these difficult decisions?
Boy, that's a That's a big question. There's somebody who actually worked with me on the Sochi crew. He was back stateside, but Kevin Martin is a big name in curling, and he was always just very quietly confident about the way he called the game. You could tell that he felt like he owned the ice, and that just comes from time and seeing all the variables that can play out in a curling match.
And the Olympic champion from Vancouver in 2010 seemed to make all the right moves and shots there. Chinese trying to execute here in the third and grab the lead.
This is a touchy little shot. We've seen a couple of rocks really curl at the end on this side for the U.S. team. And you really want this rock to sit in front of the tee line. And it slides a little deep. So now that's going to open up an opportunity for the U.S. team to come down there, try and get shot rock with a draw. And all of a sudden those yellow stones become an impediment for Team China if the U.S. is able to place one in front of them.
What kind of weight did he throw on that? I got a 90 or a 105 or 405, but with a pretty good add.
And John talking about the numbers there for Team USA tracking their opposition.
Yeah, that's just a simple split time from the back line on the delivering end to the hog line. So fast ice, 25-second ice is what we would call it. You'll get about a 4-second split from back line to the hog line, and that'll give the sweepers an idea of how hard it's been thrown.
Again, trying to judge their competition, how hard they're throwing compared to what Heath McCormick will give them to work with this stone.
That's kind of what I was looking for. Where?
Colin likes it.
Top four. Yep. Got room. Gotta go. Line's good. Really gotta go. Hard. Line's great.
So Colin liked the speed out of the hand, but now he's saying they gotta go.
Line's perfect. It's really good. Really good. Keep it going. Keep it going. Keep going. Hard. Yes. Hard.
Really got to bring that rock back there. Well done. Well done by the United States.
Super work for Team USA to put them in position
Popping those rocks was so hard.
to get on the board with another point here in the third.
See the boys working this rock almost the whole sheet.
Line's perfect.
Heath has a tendency to throw a little slower rotation than the rest of the team, so it can appear like his rock is slowing down because it's not rotating as much.
So that last effort from Heath McCormick, his shot rock. And China, the hammer for the first time in the game. But no easy task here for the Chinese.
Well, based on where the broom is, it looks like they're going to be playing a run back. Hard to say whether they're playing the straight run back to make a double. You see, if you took that yellow stone straight back onto the red behind the Chinese player there, you might be able to get a double out of that. The other option is to just run it at an angle towards shot stone and take your one.
Whoa. 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 Whoa, 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 whoa.
Need it to curl, and he puts it right through the hole.
Wow, so the hammer has been difficult to handle here in the first few ends. The U.S. able to steal a point when China has the hammer for the first time. Heath McCormick and the Americans grab the lead 2-1 after 3 on NBCSN Curling Night. NBCSN Curling Night, presented by the United States Olympic Committee. Rolling on here from Minnesota. In this match between the United States and China, the U.S. with a 2-1 advantage. Action here in end number 4. Heath McCormick and the U.S. surveying the situation after China executed a great shot, John.
Yeah, just a double peel here by China. Needed to get that center line open as you see the two U.S. rocks in the house. They really needed to clear some things out, so the U.S. probably going to go put one back right on the center line.
Tight. Out of line right now. That's tight. Yeah, tight.
Chris Plies looking at his effort.
Line's tight. Just tight. It's coming down. Whoa.
Front end of Brunt and Huffman just escorting it down.
Come on. Cross. Whoa.
So one of the challenges when the ice is curling a lot is placement of guards. It's really hard as they finish to make sure that they end up dead in front of your rocks that are in the ring. So I think that's something that the U.S. has struggled with a little bit. That's a really well-placed guard right there.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Next stone from China.
Whoa, Major.
Zhou Dujia.
Was trying to run back there, wanted to hit that a little closer to the nose and try and get one of the U.S. stones moving out of the rings. Maybe both of them even. But just a little off the mark.
So the U.S. still lying to all the colors you see in the rings and rocks. Chris Plies certainly has plenty of colors with those tattoos on both arms. All types of players and personalities welcome in the sport of curling.
There it goes. For a sec. You gotta finish this.
Well, Chris is an artist and a musician. Certainly likes his individuality. Something that he probably has to handle a little bit better when he's on a team.
And again, this team placing together some top performers in the United States. New roles for some. Again, trying to lead the U.S. to some improved results on the national landscape.
Another well-placed guard by Plies. Another run-back attempt. And they do get one of the U.S. stones moving out of the rings.
So with all that ice to cover on the run back, able to remove one of the American stones, still one of the house for Team USA.
Yeah. It's a guard, right? Yeah, I think so.
Who wants to tap? Then they make the double and roll under.
Yeah, I need to throw a guard here. Where's he going to go?
Heath McCormick trying to come up with
You like that on your first one?
some good efforts here in this fourth end. Again, his performance been just a touch spotty from his normal high level.
Yeah, we just haven't seen Heath really executing to his highest level yet. And struggling with draw weight, which is usually something that's kind of a wheelhouse for Heath.
Trying to tap it. Could draw to here then. So he doesn't have it.
That's making it double and rolls. Yeah.
We talked about this team involvement before, John. When you're struggling, is that indecisive part of the game come in a little bit more?
I think it does. It makes it harder to be aggressive and play super difficult shots. Now, this is a scenario right here where the shot isn't really that difficult, but there's a couple of things that you could do.
Keep it a little bit on this side of the line.
Yeah, just play the tap. Try and high side at a whisker.
So when they first called this shot, they were planning to tap this red one straight back. And the front end said, well, you're going to leave him a double and a roll if you do that. So we could throw a guard here is what Colin was saying. But I think they're going to play the tap, but they're going to try and stay on what they call the high side, or the center line side in this case, of the rock, so that there's no double there without rolling into the open.
2012 national champion Heath McCormick.
It's good. It's a bit tight.
Whoa.
Line's good.
Whoa.
Close. Yep.
Whoa.
Back 8. Yep. Back 12. Whoa.
How much weight?
Yep. Back 8. Yep. Yes.
Whoa. Whoa. Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's good. It's really good.
Great example of the communication all the way down the ice, talking about where the stone was, where they needed to hit the rock. Just really well done by Team USA.
I'm just saying back 8. They're acting like I was
And it goes back to the pre-shot discussion, too, to make sure they are all on the same page for that to come through the way they want.
Something that a lot of teams underestimate is, how much the communication matters. People start to assume things that everybody knows what's happening. It's a lot like a marriage, actually. And you really just want to be clear. And one of the rules that we had on teams that I played on is that you can talk your way out of a bad situation by communicating just a little extra, right? It's actually a skill that the players have to practice and work on.
Well, not as much discussion here for Team China. And Zhang Zhaoyang ready to get to work again for him, being the skip, being the final thrower of rocks and the ultimate decision maker. Relative new experience for him, just his second big competition with this job.
So that rock that he threw did come up a little further than they wanted it to and did leave a double and roll possibility, which was just missed by Team China. Similar situation now for Team USA, but a kind of a reverse situation. Now you have a rock near the button. Do you throw a straight guard out in front of the rings, or do you actually come into the rings and try and force Team China to take one?
He's kind of winging that out turn a bit, so you'd rather have him do it for that again, I think.
Okay, so split the center line?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think just
because then, like, going this way, we're fine giving up 2.
I think it's so interesting that you hear the third and the skip have their conversation, and then in the background you hear the sweepers talking about similar things but slightly different.
Yeah. Right. Fully in.
Here he's saying they want this fully into the rings, and I like that. So they want to guard shot stone, but by bringing the rock into the top 12 foot, into the red ring, they're saying to China, if you make the double, we're going to force you to 1. So either way, China's going to be forced to 1.
Where? Top 12?
If you throw a guard that's short of the rings, they can play the double. If they make it, it's a blank, and they keep the hammer.
Tight.
So it's a subtlety of the strategy of the game.
We're short. Way short. Way short.
Often. Stay with it. Whoa.
No.
Need this one to sit down. It's well short of the rings, and it's going to over-curl.
look at that. They're all moving in there like
What's
that.
happening to that?
They're moving in hard. I got every single one.
85, that should be pretty close.
And talking about time and just not having a feel for the ice on certain shots.
Some commentary there by the sweepers thinking that maybe that rock might have picked up some debris. And that's where the doubt starts to creep in. If your skip hasn't been throwing the greatest shots, did that one pick, or did Heath do something with it at the release? It's hard to say. Either way, the U.S. shot stone is mostly open, so Team China should have an opportunity to blank here.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Clean, clean. Whoa.
And that looks to be the plan.
Okay.
And the plan works. A blank end, so China keeps the hammer. The U.S., though, for the moment, keeps the lead here. 2-1, halfway through this 8-end game between the United States and China. Hope you're enjoying NBCSN Curling Night. More in a moment from Minnesota. NBCSN Curling Night is being brought to you by the 2016 World Financial Group Continental Cup of Curling. Come see why Las Vegas rocks. And by USA Curling. Support your national team by visiting www.usacurl.org. Now the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, again hosting NBCSN Curling Night. Tonight featuring China and the United States. And like we saw when we saw the American men a couple of weeks ago, John, been kind of a close to the vest game.
It has been. Heath McCormick struggling a little bit with his draw weight. They're going to switch out one of his rocks. He was actually long on his first in the first end and then short here on his second one in the first end, giving up a steal to China.
The Chinese team having some opportunities maybe to crack this thing open, but they've only been able to get a single point.
Yeah, the ice has been a little difficult for both teams to read, and this last one coming here in the third end from Team China, they're really trying to run this one back into the pile, and he puts it right through the uprights. Perfect field goal, but that means U.S. does steal a point.
Having said all that, the U.S. still has the lead. Tracy Wilson catching up with U.S. skip Heath McCormick.
Heath, a couple of tough shots, but then a couple of great shots, particularly your last rock in the third, where you were able to steal a point, but still a little bit inconsistent. Talk to me about the play of yourself and your team.
Yeah, we can get a little sharper for sure. I don't know, the ice is tricking us a little bit in a couple spots, and it tricked them as well in a similar fashion. So we don't really like my 8 rock, so we're going to switch that out. I think it might be just a little slower and curling a little more, so we're going to get rid of that and hopefully play a solid second half here.
And you're up 2-1. That's the good news.
Yeah, that's the good news. That's the good news, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks, Heath.
Thanks.
All right.
So a change of rocks for Heath McCormick. For Chris Plies, sometimes there's a change of look. His latest tattoo in honor of his late father.
Project Joy is a charity that my mother started in remembrance of my dad. It's basically a backpack food program for kids in like the Arrowhead region of Minnesota that just kind of make sure that they have food on the weekends and after school. It's just incredibly sad how many people don't have just regular food and just are so malnourished in that part of the world. I mean, I know it was shocking to me when I saw those numbers. And she's just started this foundation to make sure that no kid back home goes hungry, and it's been going well. I think this is going on the 3rd year now of that program.
Chris Plies certainly focused on making a difference in his curling and also in his community. Second half of our match between China and the U.S., it's coming up. NBCSN Curling Night rolling along here from Minnesota, presented by the United States Olympic Committee. Jason Knapp, John Benson, hope you're enjoying the latest edition of our series. The U.S., Japan, China, and New Zealand, the men and the women all here, a double round robin competition. Watching the men's portion here in this game between China and the U.S. Draw number 4 and end number 5 beginning.
Ryan Brunton shooting a solid 83% to this point in the game. Really wants a center guard here. Need that to stop before it gets in the rings in that free guard zone, and it does.
And this is a big game for the U.S. in the larger scale of things. China and Japan both coming in with 2-1 records. The U.S. and New Zealand at 1-2, so that gap would widen if the U.S. would fail to be on top at the end of this one.
Yeah, and in a double round robin where there's no playoffs, the head-to-head win and loss scenarios really make a big difference. It's a pivotal match for the U.S. because if they fall to 1-3, it's going to be really tough for them to make their way back. If they could even the records here at 2-2, they'd be right in it. With the short time frame of the double round robin, every game means a lot.
Yep.
Second one from the lefty Brunt.
Okay, easy.
Two-time participant for the United States at the World Championships in 2011 and last year 2014.
Yep, hard.
Trying to get this rock around. Have it stop in the forefoot. Well done by Ryan Brunt.
American fans in the house appreciative of that effort.
So this end, the fifth end, China having the hammer, the U.S. would actually really like to force China to take one here. If you force China to take one, that means the U.S. has the hammer and the advantage, really, in the even ends. It would tie the game up and give the U.S. the option to score 2 in the even ends.
And again, playing an 8-end game, down from the normal 10 that you see in national, international competitions.
Team China not able to navigate that corner guard and get a rock into the rings. We've seen a few ends like this when the U.S. hasn't had the hammer, where they've gotten a pretty good setup early in the end and forced China into playing some defense.
Yep. Tight.
Colin Huffman from Seattle, Washington, hoping to improve his percentage through the first 4 ends here in the second half of this game.
This is the side of the sheet that I think Heath was referring to, where they got tricked a couple of times.
Yep, finish it. Yep, finish it.
And this rock coming in very nice to the top 4. Perfect position for the U.S. Forcing China into that defensive mode again. They're going to play this run back, try and get a few of the rocks moving.
Hard to beat the numbers for Badu Shin in the first half of this game, 91%.
Close. Gets all 3 rocks moving, almost makes the triple. Great shot by Badu Shin.
Fantastic effort for the Chinese second. The U.S. still in front 2-1. We'll pick up the action in end number 5 when NBCSN Curling Night continues.
We can never get inside nose.
Back in end number 5 for the U.S. and China, the Americans up 2-1 in plotting strategy.
Sounds good. All right, Dieter, one time. I want our one time. I'm using our one time right now.
Only the skip stones remaining.
So this is a tough little shot for Heath. Bit of a test for him. He's going to try and navigate the port here. The space between the red rock and the yellow rock in front of the house. Trying to hit that yellow stone in the rings on the nose.
Heath McCormick, sub 50% shooting number for him, yet the Americans still leading at this point.
Whoa. Hack. Right off. Close. Whoa.
Everybody gazing at this shot.
Sweeper's just walking next to it. It's not going to get by the yellow guard.
Okay.
The struggles continue for Heath.
Okay. Weight really wasn't that bad. Maybe just bumper?
Just what?
Maybe just bumper?
What's that, board?
Yeah, just a couple feet heavy. I mean,
So the Americans still with shot rock here, but China with its last stone of this end trying to complicate things for the Americans.
Chinese skip taking a look. So he can see most of this red here on the back of the button. But again, it's a tricky shot to get through this port. Very similar to Heath's last shot.
And part of the reason the U.S. still has the lead with difficult shooting for the American skip, Chinese skip, not much better.
Whoa. Knee down. Hard.
Really working this one. Will he get by the guard? Not quite. But he does spin a second yellow into the rings. That may end up being significant.
So throughout this game, a lot of those guards living up to their building. and really doing the job of stymieing both of these teams.
Halfway through the hole. It's basically right off the center line.
We heard Heath at halftime mention that the ice was tricking both teams a little bit, and I think you're seeing that in those shots. I mean, typically these teams are going to be able to get by these guards more often. And what that usually means is you see that rock come to rest, clicking off 2 guards. What that usually means is that there's a spot on the
How
ice
much you got of this one?
where there's actually a ridge, where on one side of the ridge, the rock will actually continue to run straight. On the other side of the ridge, it will curl like crazy. So you actually have to wait for it to climb the ridge, and then once it gets over it, you have to be very aware of where you are on the ice, and it's a hard thing to master.
Really riding that fall line, if you will, to try to find the perfect spot.
Kind of weight I just threw.
Okay.
And Heath McCormick with a chance to put the U.S. in a good position here to force China to 1 point with the hammer.
This is our 3rd straight shot of the end through a port. 2 guards sitting out in front of the rings. Got to navigate between the space to get to that yellow rock in the rings.
They talk about NFL quarterbacks sometime throwing the tight windows. These are pretty tight windows too.
Just by the yellow. Great shot by McCormick.
Does that qualify as a touchdown?
It does.
What a strike from Heath McCormick.
If that's a touchdown, when he gets by that guard there, it's like tiptoeing on the sidelines to make that touchdown. Watch this rock. There's not much space. And he gets the perfect roll in behind the yellow stone.
So the U.S. set up here to have a nice end, but China does have the final decision maker with the hammer.
This is going to be a run back. Going to run their own rock back into the 2 reds. He's got to get both reds moving to get shot rock.
Big moment for Jia Liang.
It's close. It's got a curl. Well, that's a pretty good effort. He actually gets 2 of the reds out of the rings, does not stick around for one, giving the U.S. another steal. But that was a really good effort.
The U.S. was lying 3. They'll settle to steal 1 and double their lead. It's now 3-1 through 5 here against China in a critical game here in this NBCSN Curling Night Series. The U.S. trying to even its overall record at 2 wins and 2 losses. China stole a point from the United States in the first end, but after that, nothing. While the U.S. has single points in the second, third, and fifth ends to have a 3-1 lead with action underway here in the 6th. Jason Knapp and 2010 Olympian John Benson with you on NBCSN Curling Night.
All right, you guys just look at this one. You guys just sweep by. We got you.
U.S. team in a position of control, being ahead by 2. With only a few ends left to play.
Whoa, weight's good. Whoa. Whoa.
Second rock here for Chris Plies, the American third.
Trying to get by and make a lightweight tap. He's by the guard. Great shot to lie 4.
This a big spot in this game now for China to try to rally.
You know, to this point, the front 3 players for the U.S. have really done their job. I mean, China's been looking at doubles and runbacks almost the entire game and have not really been able to develop any offense.
It's the situation again here for Zhou Du Jia.
Makes the hit. I think they wanted to actually hit and roll off of that pair of reds, get their shooter to roll to the left as we look at it there, to hide behind the guard, because this is an open hit again for Team USA. Really setting up to be a force situation.
7 first, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Like a good, firm, normal.
I like it.
So simple task here for Heath McCormick. But again, sometimes the simple for the skips in this game has been quite difficult.
Well, and when you miss a few, you start pressing and overthinking. Even the simple shots become a little more complicated.
Really gotta go. Hard! Hard!
Really gotta go,
Whoa,
guys.
whoa!
Whoa, yep. Really good.
That's a really, really well done shot by Heath. Pushes it through the hole. Good sweeping by the front end players there to hold that rock on line.
It's an army of red in the house for the United States. And now China try to extricate itself from this problem in the 6th end.
Well, China's going to play a freeze here. They're just going to come down to this red stone behind the tee line and freeze to the corner of it. Try and generate even the slightest amount of offense. Use those red rocks to their advantage.
Zhang Jia Liang.
力量，但我感觉好像是下不来。还可以，力量可以。56。谢罗，56。谢罗没问题。
Throwing a freeze like this is really just a draw. But it's well known as one of the tougher shots in curling because you really need your sweepers to be able to place the stone exactly where you've called it. And this looks a little on the heavy side. Taps the U.S. stone back a little bit, but it's still in a good position. It's still using that red stone as a backstop. It is shot rock.
Just play a split.
Tap it back.
Yeah, I think so. Or tap it, yeah.
That
you do.
Tap
I can't
anywhere
get
so
that.
he can't nose it and he can't get 2, right?
I mean, it's just going to go into
It's
here
dead on
anyways,
nose,
right?
3 feet.
Correct.
Foot. Yeah.
That's the call.
I like that.
Again, you saw the view from the overhead, and now
All right here.
Chris Plies, Heath McCormick. More in-depth conversation.
6 inches, he might be able to make something, but that's the call.
Same two at the front end at the other side. Ryan Brunt, Colin Huffman.
The outturn. I like the tap. I love the tap.
He's going around.
I like the tap more.
Yeah.
So you like back button?
Yep.
Okay. We played it earlier.
Yeah.
All right.
Straight draw, back button.
Should be good.
Yep.
Back button?
Yep.
All right, bud.
So you hear the conversation there. It's an interesting point. So Colin Huffman definitely wanting Heath to call a different shot. But as Heath comes down the ice, he knows enough not to question his skip. Heath wants to throw the draw. Colin knows that Heath has had his struggles. So rather than plant another seed of doubt in there, there's not a whole lot of difference between the tap, which is what Colin wanted to throw, and the draw.
Yep. Line's good.
Supporting the shot verbally, and now supporting it physically.
Oh, you got room. Yep.
Yep.
Come on.
Whoa.
Whoa, you're good. You're by, you're by, you're by.
Whoa.
At the end, Colin. At the end.
Yep.
And you see the result. Again, it's subtle, but communication isn't about always knowing when to talk. It's about knowing when not to talk. You know, and I said earlier, it's something that a lot of teams in this sport underestimate. You definitely can't have 4 skips out there.
And again, with this new configuration of the United States team, with placing players that are some of the best that the United States has to offer all together in certain groupings, a lot of those players getting used to the styles of one another. here at this event.
So this is an interesting situation for China. As we look at it here, China's going to play what we call an in-off. They're going to hit the yellow rock and have their shooter roll to the right and try and at least get in front of this red stone, if not remove it from play and lay 2. So he's got to catch about a third of this yellow rock and roll to the right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's in the perfect spot. Or a little deeper, you're saying?
Peek in from what the U.S. is looking at from their vantage point. And now the Chinese stone, final one of the 6th end, on the way.
This rock is curling. Just clips the guard, but he gets a little lucky and wicks the American stone off the back forefoot, and China's going to score 1 there.
Wow, that could have been disaster for the Chinese. Somehow they're able to get 1, but for the Americans, that's a good result. China forced a 1. The Americans have the hammer back, and they still have the lead. It's been a tight one between the United States and China. A series of singles. You add it up, the Americans have the lead 3-2 here into the 7th end.
China avoiding near disaster there in the 6th. They clip a guard out in front of the house and end up scoring 1 despite the miss. So from a game plan standpoint, as a coach, what I always like to ask my athletes to do is to think about just being ahead going into the second to last end. So in this case, it's the 7th end, and I don't care if you're ahead by 1 point or 1,000 points. It's always good to be ahead because any result in this end is a pretty good result other than giving up 3. If you're 1 down coming home and you have the hammer, so if you give up 2 here, it's not the worst thing in the world because you'll have the hammer in the last end. So the U.S. in a great position here. Ryan Brunt made another great tick shot, showing that free guard zone again.
Now the lead for China. Zhou Qiang try to help set the Chinese up in a good spot here in the early stages of this 7th end. Again, only playing 8 ends in this curling night competition. And the Americans trying to improve their record to 2-2. That would push them into a tie with the Chinese, who started this draw at 2-1, tied for first with Japan.
Another tick shot on its way from Ryan Brunt. Just got to get a little piece, get it off the center line. And if his shooter stops here in the rings, that's perfect. 2 great shots by Ryan Brunt.
That thing spun? Yeah. It was dead under.
That's perfect, Ryan.
Came a rock further.
That's dirty.
Strong play from the American lead.
You can see how that affects the end, because now there's nothing on the center line. China's going to have to try to put some of those rocks back, and now that it's the 5th rock of the end, U.S. can open up the gunship, so to speak, and start peeling stones. And this one's going to slip into the rings. But once you get to this point, when you have a lead and the hammer, you're pretty happy.
Colin Huffman at 6'3", rather tall for a curler.
Right off, no roll.
It's fine.
Would love to see this spin back into the rings, but it's not. Yeah, a guy as tall as Colin, even myself at 6'1", when you're on really fast ice, that hog line comes up really fast.
Length not always a good thing.
And we should probably mention that, of course, on the playing end, the rock has to cross the hog line to be in play. On the shooting end, it's actually the foul line. So you have to have released the stone before the stone crosses that line.
And in the modern age of curling, the light will illuminate on the stone if it's not released in time.
This particular event, we're not using the sensor handles with the electronic technology, so it's kind of a game of honor.
Back to the original days of the sport.
Give it some room if you can. I think you're there.
And we saw the Chinese rock there as we were talking about. It didn't cross the hog line completely, so it didn't make it into play. And that gets removed.
So the front of the house pretty open. Colin Huffman wanting that to sit. Maybe not exactly where he wanted, but the U.S. where it would like to be, on top here late in this game. This is a game of contrast. It's been nicknamed both chess on ice and the roaring game. And somehow both of them ring true. Curling is mind and matter, ins and outs, freezes and burns. And you can see proof on the faces of nearly everyone who plays. Who will be roaring at the end of tonight's chess match, the United States or China? Seventh end underway for the United States and China. The U.S. clinging to a precarious 3-2 lead. The opportunity to even its mark at 2 games apiece in this double round robin competition with the U.S., China, Japan, and New Zealand. China with an opportunity to improve to 3-1, which would be a strong record with 6 games available for each team.
And this end is shaping up really nicely for the U.S. This is probably the most classic setup for the team with a hammer that we've seen so far, with everything out of the center. The U.S. having 2 stones on either side of the rings, making it difficult for Team China to force them to take one or to steal one. That freeze right there, very well done.
Chris Plies.
Oh yeah, we got a piece. Stick. That's fine.
Makes a nice shot there. Is he going to keep both reds in the rings? He does. Well done by Chris Plies. He continues to shoot well.
That worked. We just had to,
The 2010 Olympian delivering a big-time power effort with enough precision to keep the U.S. lying too.
So now China will try and make a freeze or a tap on the opposite side of the rings. Got to get by the guard. And he does. Makes the tap. It's hard to see who's left sitting shot. I think it's
for sure we're shot.
Team USA.
I think so. All right, so what do I need here?
Believe the United States agree.
Yeah. 4. Same speed. Heater.
Another peek from Heath McCormick.
4. Yeah.
But with the hammer,
95.
this a promising end for the United States.
Close. Close, right?
T-line. Over there.
So assuming the U.S. is shot on the other side of the house, they need this rock to settle down. They want to lay 2. Is it going to go a little deep? It does. Now, it's hard to see who's actually second shot. In either case, I think China needs to play a freeze on one of these stones, which is what they're kind of looking at right now. You know, I did hear Chris Plies say just prior to throwing that shot that they needed to go. We haven't seen a shot of the clock yet. It hasn't come into play in any of our matches, but it may be that they're running a little low on time and that Chris may have rushed that a little bit.
How often are you apprised of the clock as you go through a match normally? What was your procedure?
So the clock is right behind the sheet. So there's always somebody on the team who's kind of assigned at keeping track of where we're at. And it's roughly 7 minutes an end is where you want to be at. If you're under 14 minutes with a couple ends to go, you know that you're a little bit behind.
Again, it's about 73 minutes in a 10-end game, 59 minutes in an 8-end game like we're playing here.
Looks like this rock is over curling. It's going to come up to their own. Now, Team China laying shot with that rock right behind the tee line. And the United States having second and third count.
Just trying to thin it across the top. I think if we basically if we dead nutted, I think we're 1-2. Yeah. Just a peel?
Yeah, just squeeze it out of there. All right.
So you hear the weight call there is peel. They're going to try and hit this yellow stone on the right-hand side. Just catch a piece of it. Try and double both yellows out of the rings, or at least push them far enough out that the U.S. is for sure counting 2.
Great look at Heath McCormick leaving the hack and releasing that stone.
Yep, clean you up. Hard.
Calling the sweepers on.
Attaboy, get up.
Great shot by Heath. Nice double takeout. Again, I don't think he moved the first yellow out of the rings completely, but you can see U.S. is lying 2. So they're in a great position right now. China is going to be forced to throw another freeze. Question is which side to freeze to. The problem they face here is if you don't throw a perfect freeze down to one of those red rocks, and when I say perfect, they have to be locked on so that even if Heath threw peel, he couldn't get that yellow rock moving out of the house. So it's a very precise shot. And they're really going to struggle here to make something happen where the U.S. doesn't score at least 2 points.
And that could be terminal to the cause of China in this game in the next to last end.
So it looks here like they've chosen to draw underneath this guard. Going to draw under the yellow guard, try and get at least second shot. It's going to be tough to get shot rock underneath that yellow stone. As a secondary option, they could always sweep that rock down to a freeze to this red one back here. Taking a second look at it. I think they're realizing that in order to get buried underneath that corner guard, they may not be shot rock. If it's me, I think I have to freeze to one of those reds in the back. These are both very, very tough shots because you're aiming for a spot that's about 1 foot around and it's 140 feet away. And you're throwing a 42-pound piece of granite to that spot.
Well, we'll see if the Chinese unit is spot on here at maybe the most vital spot in this game. In China, down 1, next to last end.
So they did go away from the decision to throw the draw underneath the corner guard, and they're going to go back to the freeze. on this red stone in the back of the rings. This rock has a long way to curl. There it goes. Moving a little bit. Don't think it's going to curl quite enough. The weight was nearly perfect, but the line was a little bit off.
So the chance for the U.S. to eliminate that yellow stone and put themselves in position to earn 3 here and really seal up a possible second win.
So if they hit this on the nose, this yellow stone on the nose, the red rock is going to leave the rings, but they will score 2. If he hits it just outside of nose on the wall side, they will score 3.
Final stone, next to last end for Heath McCormick. And a chance for the U.S. to put themselves in great position for the win.
Hard! Really hard, come on!
Sounds close.
Great shot.
Got it done. The U.S. grabbing 3 in the end. And now the Chinese will concede. Down 4 going to the final end. That's it. Give the U.S. the victory. 6-2 the final over the Chinese team. Both of these squads even up their record at 2 wins and 2 losses through 4 of the 6 draws. Back to wrap up this latest edition of NBCSN Curling Night. That's coming up from Minnesota. NBCSN Curling Night has been brought to you by the United States Olympic Committee. For the latest deals on official Team USA gear, visit TeamUSAShop.com. And by USA Curling and the Manhattan Curling Cup, coming to Chelsea Piers, New York this March. Another entertaining night on Curling Night, especially for the United States. Tight, close, almost defensive affair with China for a while. The team's trading singles before 3 in the 7th ends it for the U.S. The victory over China. Tracy Wilson standing by to chat about it with Heath McCormick.
Well, Heath, inconsistent early on, but you fought through with a really strong finish. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, we played really solid the last 4 ends. We had them under a lot of pressure. And obviously a nice way to finish the game for sure.
After 4 ends, you told me that you weren't that comfortable with the 8th stone. You were going to exchange it, and you came up with the key shots you were looking for. Did the stone make the difference?
Well, I'd like to tell you that for TV for sure. But yeah, we switched it out and Ryan threw it. It did actually curl a little bit more. So whether, anyways, we got rid of it, and I think I made every shot the last 4 ends. So that was good.
Okay, congratulations on your win.
Thanks very much.
John, they're talking about the finish to the end, but you think the start was the key.
Yeah, these 2 perfect tick shots by Ryan Brunt. This one here rolling into the rings for a counter, really setting up the end for Heath. And this last one by Heath, he really did play well the second half. And this is a perfectly executed hit. And he gets his 3 to win the game, seal the match.
A 3 to end it for the United States as they pick up win number 2. 2-2 overall, tied right now with China, only trailing Japan. The Japanese able to beat New Zealand and keep their lead in the overall standings. How about the women, John, in a thriller in a match against China, went to extra ends.
Extra ends, and the U.S. came out a little short on this one. They end up losing this match. It's really setting up as a big battle on the women's side. We're going to see some games coming up here that are going to matter a lot.
So 7-6 is the final result for China over the United States. Both of those teams on the women's side with 2-1 records. And just like on the men's side of things, trailing Japan, the Japanese with a 3-1 mark after another win over winless New Zealand. And John, you look at the overall standings, Japan leading both competitions. You surprised?
You know, Jason, I'm not surprised at all. Both teams have been playing together for a long time and have a lot of international experience, so it's not a shock at all.
Next time we see you here on NBCSN Curling Night, we'll see the American women in action again, one more time against New Zealand.
Yeah, the last game was a blowout for the U.S. I know New Zealand is playing a lot better now. They've gotten used to the ice conditions and being in the United States, so I expect a little bit better game.
Big opportunity for the United States women to close the advantage on overall tournament leading Japan. That's when we see you next time. For this time, for John Benson and our entire NBCSN Curling Night crew, this is Jason Epp saying so long from Minnesota.